news that we've heard over the last week about the F1 season resuming, but with races held behind closed doors without any fans. Now this comes on the back of what's been happening in Austria, where they've started to ease up on their restrictions on movements of people. And off the back of that then has been the announcement or the speculation that Formula One season will kick off in Austria, but without any fans in the grandstands. What do you think of this?
Actually, I'm all for this, and there's many reasons why I'm for this. But first and foremost, most of the fans around the world that are into Formula One actually do follow it on TV. Realistically, for the average fan experience, what really do the fans actually being there, who are in effect a minority, bring to it? Now, we can say in various areas they maybe add to a certain ambience. For instance, at Monaco, you can't help but see the fans. They're all over the place. They're lined up everywhere. But realistically, when you're focused on the racing, do you really pay that much attention to it? It's mostly just the hustle and bustle in the background pre-race that you really notice the fans. In between times, it's not actually going to affect 99% of the viewers. And realistically, those fans that would be there actually watching it are still going to tune in on TV. So they're not really losing out. As much as I love attending motorsport, actually, motorsport without the attendance but still viewable on TV is still going to be a perfect good fix for me in the meantime. And don't get me wrong, I would love to be at so many of the Grand Prix or other races this year. But you know what? I'll take this happily as a compromise.
I mean, I'm all for it. I'm all for it because I think it will advance the different engineering with the cameras, the visuals, getting into the pits, getting more of that in depth for the online viewer, the TV viewer, where it's more enhanced to get more of the feeling. Whereas as a fan, you get that sense, you get that buzz, you get the whole atmosphere. Like Tim says, there's a massive ambience that comes with it. But the more you get with this, the more you can push the boundaries with all the camera work and stuff like that, the more you can bring the viewer into that world.
I think that I think the problem's going to be is that a lot of the racetracks promoters that put on the Grand Prix, they rely on the ticket money to make their money. So if you've not got fans going in, if you've not got concessions selling your merchandise, hot dogs, souvenir, blah blah blah, all the rest of it, then how are those organisations that are putting the event on going to make any money and make enough money to survive and to go forward? We know how expensive Grand Prix racing is for these tracks to put on. Some of the events are well in almost 100 million. So it's to not have those people there is going to be quite a problem, I think.
I mean, I'd take your point where you need that revenue to maintain the standard of the circuit, right? That's a given, right? Without that, you can't upkeep the stadium. You can't keep it. It's foregone conclusion that if no one's going, you can't just have teams turning up and racing when there's nothing coming through the gate to refund it.
So, I mean, do we think then that Chase Carey needs to maybe wipe out this year's costs or for holding a Grand Prix?
Yeah, I'll come in there and totally agree with you on that one. That's a point I was actually going to make. There needs to be some readjustment in costs. As much as you could argue that actually it's the cost that they're going to bear this year keeps their race alive for future years where they can make profit from it. Equally, a lot of these tracks will not survive simply on the losses they'll make this year. So Formula One needs to look at the bigger picture, because if you suddenly cut out a lot of the big races, let's say, for instance, if we took Italy out the equation, and if we took the UK's race out the equation, realistically, how much damage would that actually do to Formula One? That's just 2 races out of a calendar of 24. No offence, but the Vietnam Grand Prix not being there, does that really faze me? No. But the big races, the ones I really tune in to see, the ones I'll literally plan months in advance to make sure I'm going to be by the TV or at the trackside, no. If that wasn't there, I'm going to lose interest very rapidly. Those are the sort of key events to me.
I mean, there are circuits that I don't feel need a fan base there. If you take Bahrain, like say Vietnam, circuits like that can get away with it being behind closed doors. But when you take Silverstone, you take Monaco, you take Spa, you take Interlagos, they need that. Do you know what I mean? If they're not there, you lose, like you say, the whole essence of a season just deteriorates.
I mean, let's go back and take a look at the Shanghai circuit, the Chinese Grand Prix. Remember the first couple of years that it was there, all of the grandstands were packed. But then more recently, you look at the grandstand out towards the back, the hairpin going onto the long back straight. For at least the last 6 or 7 years, they've been completely empty and have had advertising hoardings on them. And when about 10, 15 years ago, when it was talked about Paul Ricard hosting the French Grand Prix again, the original idea for that was that there would be no fans there. It would be completely behind closed doors. So these aren't new ideas, or there aren't ways in which fans haven't been at Grand Prix before. But how much of a difference does it make? And you're right. Maybe you're right, Wilf. It's dependent upon the circuit.
Yeah, it's very much dependent on the circuit. I mean, also, I think we need to take a bit of a look at some of these tracks and realise that Monaco cannot simply be moved. It's a street circuit. There's other concerns around that. You need to plan in advance. I mean, let's face it, how many other street circuits are there? There are more than one. So Baku can't really happen either. Yeah, the Australian Grand Prix, because although they might be park roads, they're still roads, and you still need to organise the closure. So this is it. Those, as well as the fans, you've got other considerations. So there are some races that we're sadly going to have to miss out on for the year, no matter what happens now, because simply you just can't reorganise that type of stuff. Shutting down a whole city for a race, you can do it if you plan well in advance, but in the current climate, it's just not a thing. And to be honest, to even attempt it would actually, tarnish the sport, I think.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Okay, so some interesting thoughts there. We're not completely against races being held behind closed doors and just in front of the TVs, and I think it's probably something that the sport needs to at least keep a fan base going for this year. How many races behind closed doors, what races, we'll have to wait and see. But certainly I think interesting to see that Austria could be the first. And probably, actually, again, as a circuit, that might be one that wouldn't necessarily be a huge problem if it was behind closed doors.
I mean, I think there's a few circuits that if they looked into it, they could make maybe like a quarter of a season by doing them behind closed doors with certain tracks, where the logistics, like Tim says, the logistics of shutting down entire cities is not feasible. Whereas some circuits, it's easier to put on a race like that behind closed doors, like that. But even going forward, you can still do a 24 race season doing 50-50, using the circuits that need to be generating that kind of money put into the Formula One calendar, and then somewhere you'll get a better experience from watching it at home than you would be there. Because if you was there, sometimes you can only see like the pit straight, and that's all you're going to get. But then when you watch it at home, you get the full experience.
Also, that does bring me to another point, actually, Wilf. Thank you for reminding me. I mean, double headers at the tracks, that's going to be interesting. Something I actually saw earlier today was the fact they talk about actually using the same circuit, actually, rather than maybe clockwise, anti-clockwise as well, which is actually going to add a really interesting element.
Well, that might be something for another time. We're almost out of time on this one today, guys, but thank you very much for joining me. Don't forget to like and share and post your comments below, and we hope you can join us again very soon. Thank you very much.